Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Mont, and in this video I'm going to give you some tips concerning the user interface in Final Fantasy XIV. If you've been playing for a while, you're probably going to be aware of most of these things, but if you're a new player, there are a lot of options to customize your user interface in 14. And I think it's worth touching on as it can improve your experience, even if it's not the most exciting thing to talk about. That, and a few people have asked me about my own user interface and how I got this or that running. So to kick things off, and I'll point out this video is done from the perspective of a PC player. I don't play on PS4, so I don't know how things may differ there. But we'll bring up the systems menu and then system configuration. That's where most of the big boy options are tucked away. Now keep in mind, I'm not going to go through everything as that would make this a 5-hour long video, just the things I feel are noteworthy. That said, if I didn't touch on something in this video that you feel is worth discussing, please do mention it down in the comments below. Something I find important you might gloss over, something I gloss over you might think is a game changer. But in this first tab you've got display settings. This is where you can scale the user interface to fit your comfort level, amongst other things. And one important thing to note here, if you scroll to the bottom you'll find limit frame rate when client is inactive. This means that if you alt-tab out of 14, it'll cut the frame rate down to about 15 frames per second. I think this is a great option as I alt-tab out of the game a lot. And on that note, I play in borderless windowed, just my preferred way to play games, and it means when you alt-tab, you can have another window in front of it and you can still see 14 in the background. Next up we have sound. Right at the top you'll see play sounds when window is not active. Good one to toggle on here is system sounds. This means that, well, let's say you're alt-tabbed and you're, I don't know, watching Netflix, you'll still get the ping sound when a cue pops, which is super handy. You can also adjust things such as mount music here. The next tab is mostly for graphics options, which are things you'll obviously want to lower until you can sustain a solid frame rate depending on your hardware. I won't go into much detail, but generally, lowering screen space ambient occlusion and shadows will be some of your first things to lower to get more frames. Skipping over mouse and gamepad options, we have theme settings. This is just changing the colour of the game's UI. At time of writing, there's only default dark and the newer light setting, which is a sort of cream colour. Personally, I'm hoping for a classic blue option in the future, but that's how you do that if you were wondering. In other settings, I suggest changing your screenshots to JPEG just to save space, as the difference in quality isn't something your average person is going to notice. You can also change where screenshots are saved, handy, and it's also where you can change your cutscene audio if you want to change it from English to Japanese or vice versa. Last tab below that is all for colorblind options, which, if you're like me, can be very useful. Next up though, let's look at the character config menu, just above system. In the first one, control settings, you'll notice cutscene skipping has an option. Skip playback of previously viewed scenario cutscenes and transportation cutscenes. I would suggest turning these on. It essentially means that if you've seen a cutscene, it will skip it when it happens again, like when you get to the end of a dungeon and a boss pops up. Oh, and if you're wondering about standard and legacy movement, in standard, pressing S or back will make your character walk backwards, whereas in legacy, instead of backpedaling, the character will turn and run in that direction. Then at the top, if you move over to the next tab, targeting, you'll see a range of things for your targeting options. Not much to say here, other than, well, those are my preferred settings and I never felt much need to change them, although I did experiment briefly. Nothing felt particularly better to me though, but you may find something else works better here for you. Now, I'll skip over filters as I don't have anything to note there, but in character we have the display headgear and auto sheath weapon options, which I know a lot of people are curious about, and pretty self-explanatory, but displaying headgear means you can turn your character's hat on or off, and auto-sheathing weapons means when you're not in combat, your character will put their weapon away by themselves, something I don't personally like. Right below that we have battle effects, a very important one. I see a lot of comments from people saying, oh, there's too much visual spam on the screen, there's too many spell effects going on. Well, if you find yourself blinded by all of that from your spells and abilities, here you go. Or if you just prefer not having them there, because I know some people would rather just have the animation of, say, a sword slash without having any visual sparks and laser beams. Well, here you go. You can turn them on and off, and on a per character basis. I choose to have all of my effects on, but party and others limited. Sometimes I'll turn it to none if someone is spamming a lot in a city. One option I would like to see them add here though, friends. So if you have friends in your group or whatever, you can choose to have their effects on, or maybe even link shell and friends, stuff like that. But in general, I would say put yourself to all if you like them, and everyone else to limited or none to reduce visual clutter. Then in mouse, I think it's good to have enable clicking on field to remove target. It basically means you can remove your current target by clicking somewhere on the screen that isn't a person. But if you find yourself losing your target a lot because of it, well, toggle it off. Moving on to item settings, not too much to say again, other than I like having it set to expanded so I can see all my items at once. Then we have UI settings with general, HUD and party list. Again, nothing particular to note here apart from the hide duty list during instance duty. This essentially means your quests will not show up when you're in a dungeon, because you don't need to really see that some character has asked you to pick up 5 apples when you're in a dungeon. Party list sorting is one I do like because it ensured I can always keep people in the same position, as it were, for when targeting using F2 or F3. There's a lot of times I'll want to cast something on, say, the tank, whether it's the off tank or the main tank, whether I'm tanking or healing, whatever, so I can quickly hit F2 and I know it will always be that same person. Which also works into macros because you could have something like, I don't know, cast T2 and it would always cast it on that second member who will always be a tank or whatever. Now we have display name settings. This is where you can turn off nameplates and customize nameplates. Again, nothing I really need to say here other than I like having my own character's nameplate off by default, as I don't need a reminder of my name. I am Alex, I am Silvermont. But you can change the colours, which is good. Next is hotbar settings, and you'll be spending a while here if you're going to be customizing your UI a little more in depth. You'll notice the second tab is called sharing. What this means is hotbars that are toggled on will be shared across any class and job. So in my case, you'll see I have every hotbar shared apart from the first 3. These 3 are where I put all my class specific abilities. So of course I want those to change when I change class. The rest, I don't want them changing, so I keep them the same. Finally, there's the log settings. This is where you can turn off the game's profanity filter for starters. You can also set a different colour for different chat options. Say, red for your free company, purple for this link shell, pink for that link shell, yellow for friend messages, you get the idea. As for log filters, you can essentially use that to make different tabs in your chat box display different things. Maybe you don't want to see general chat in one tab because people are talking so much in a city. Or you want a tab exclusively for NPC and event speech so you can quickly check what people were saying in dialogue. There you go. You can even set it to receive message notification sounds per chat. For example, you want to hear a notification when you get a PM or when a message comes through in a small link shell? You can, whilst keeping them off for your link shell that has 9 million people in it talking constantly. Nice. And that mostly covers it for menus, but now you're wondering, how do I get those class and mount toggles that you have? Well, simple. Essentially, that toggle button is a macro that hides a hotbar and displays the same hotbar every time you press the macro. So when you hit the macro once, it makes the hotbar appear. You press the macro again, it makes it disappear. So we create that macro and we put it in one hotbar. Then we drag the other hotbar, the one that is being toggled on and off, into place so it looks like it is expanding out from the macro button. As for that macro, it's going to look something like this: /m icon auto attack / hotbar display 10 toggle. Now you can change auto attack for any icon you like. I just thought it looked like a good one for changing classes. The display 10 toggle is the important bit. You'll want to change the 10 for whatever number hotbar you are personally using. Pretty simple, huh? But how about changing the size and the scale of hotbars? Well, bring up HUD layout and then you can click on things. Click on a hotbar for example, then hit the gear icon and you can change how big it is. As for that 1, 2, 3, 4 in the middle, those are 4 different HUD loadouts, so you can even swap to a completely different HUD if you want to. Maybe you want one HUD for combat and one for gathering. And you'll notice on certain things, such as buffs, status info enhancements in the gearbox, you can split elements. Now that's really handy. That's why I have self buffs on the left and other buffs on the right, just so I can keep track of what's my buff and what's a buff someone else has cast on me. If you play around with it, you'll see there's a lot of depth and interesting things you can do here. Now of course, I try to keep my Harden UI pretty simple and what works for me, but there's a lot more you can do if you play around with macros and the like. But I think that about covers everything I wanted to cover. And of course, if you have any questions or suggestions for things I missed, please do leave them down below in the comments, and until next time, you guys take care. Ciao.